Welcome to episode 80 of the Talking Friars podcast. My name is Ben Fadden here today. Not a whole lot of news, not really any news to talk about today on this podcast because obviously it's a lockout in Major League Baseball. Nothing has changed. Ever since that Wednesday kind of lockout, it's kind of interesting to be quite honest. There's been literally no talks. There's been no conversations or anything between the league and the players, no conversations, nothing. So that kind of just tells you that before that December 1st or December 2nd midnight kind of deadline, they wanted all these moves to be made, maybe as kind of a bargaining thing. Owners saying, "Hey, we're spending our money. You can't come yell at us. You can't do that." So I think you're seeing no movement, no urgency. Maybe one because it's the holidays. Some teams are like the Mets are just trying to narrow down their manager search, but they're going to use the excuse for the holidays, that excuse, and then I don't expect much urgency to happen for another couple of months at least, and that's really sad to hear because you want, this off season, you want MLB Network on, and they're not even showing anything. They're just showing past baseball games, like it's just, the regular off season. Like nothing at all is happening. There is nothing. So it's just sad that there's literally no activity happening. So I wouldn't expect much urgency to happen until like February 1st. I think that's like a deadline I would look at because then you have 2 weeks to go about till pitchers and catchers report for spring training. At least that's the set date right now. And then obviously you want them to have a full ramp up, especially pitchers for spring training, so that you can be ready for the full season and that there aren't a lot of injuries that happen. So I think that February 1st is a date that they probably should want to have something done by, or at least have some traction towards it. I know that's a long ways away, but they're going to probably, not have a whole lot of urgency until then, I would think, because there is no urgency. There's no games being missed. And as we saw leading up to this deadline, this past week before that deadline happened on December 2nd at midnight, there was a lot of action going on. There was a lot of things happening in urgency. And so I think the players in the league kind of know that regardless of when this deadline is, there can be that same action again in a week or a 2-week span where there's all these deals and all that. There can be that action again. At that time. And so I think that's why you're seeing not a whole lot of urgency because they know that even if, let's say, an agreement happens February 1st, 2 weeks, they have a week and a half or however amount of time they have to get deals done. Both sides have probably agreed that they think that they can get it, deals happening. So it's sad. I just don't think there's going to be a whole lot of urgency. So that's kind of the CBA negotiation update. There isn't a lot of an update. Just kind of when I think a deadline is going to happen. But moving into the major part of this episode, why I'm recording this, thank you again for listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get it. Watching on YouTube, I appreciate it. The main thing is I wanted to have some fun a little bit today with the trade proposal that I was thinking about. A little bored because of no offseason happening, no offseason moves. So just thinking about how the Padres, some trades you might see or hypothetical trades that do make sense. They do make sense for the Padres and obviously the other team involved that could happen after the lockout happens or lockout is done and concludes. So I have a trade. The Padres involved with the Red Sox. A hypothetical trade. Obviously, this hasn't happened. It might not happen, probably won't happen, but it's just fun to talk about because it is a situation that a trade is probably going to happen from that position. And it's a trade that could work. It could work. So that trade is the Padres and the Red Sox. Those are the two teams involved. The Padres trading Luis Campusano or Aaron Nola to the Red Sox, as well as Eric Hosmer and $39 million to the Red Sox, and in return, the Padres receive a pitching prospect or two, like a Brian Bello, however you say his name, who's one of the top pitching prospects in that organization. So that's my hypothetical trade. I wrote about the story today on gaslantball.com, so that's why I'm kind of doing it here. Just kind of, you have an audio, visual version here on this podcast on YouTube, or you can read it. And so I do want to show you that right now. This is the possible trade that I did write about. Again, what I just mentioned, Luis Campusano or Austin Nola and Eric Hosmer, and the Red Sox would take on $20 million of the remaining contract. The Padres would obviously give them $39 million, which is a huge chunk of it, but Eric Hosmer just hasn't lived up to his production, and so they're going to need to bite. They're going to need to give that team a lot of salary relief and a lot of help paying off Hosmer's contract. Padres receive pitching prospect such as Abello. It could be anyone. It could be a lower level prospect. It could be someone worse than that. It's not, this trade for me isn't really about what the Padres receive, although, they probably should get some good help back because the farm system isn't as strong as it was because of all the trades that AJ has made in the past, with Clevenger and Pham, Cronenworth, Grisham, all those, Snell, Darvish, Musgrove, all those guys. You can keep going on and on, including the trades they made last year with Frazier, giving up Marcano, Mason Thompson. They gave up for Daniel Hudson, which didn't really work out, but just a lot of prospects. Farm system just isn't really as strong. So I think that getting something back, substantial back, would help. But this trade isn't really about the talent that they're receiving back. It's more about the flexibility that they're receiving back. So like I mentioned here, I think that it's a good trade, I think, for both sides. For the Padres, like I just mentioned, they get the flexibility, right? They don't have a whole lot of payroll space. Spot track I saw before the Frazier trade at the start of the offseason, the total luxury tax space was negative $3 million. Now that number has obviously changed, but there's still, it's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of moves that I think the Padres are going to have to make if they want that financial flexibility that they just don't really have at the moment. And a big part of that gaining that flexibility could be trading Eric Hosmer and some of his contract. Again, they're going to have to eat a lot of it, but at least they get some, $20 million of salary relief, which could really help because that $20 million could be spent elsewhere. That $20 million could be spent on the first year of a Nick Castellanos deal or a Chris Bryant deal or a Nelson Cruz or a Kyle Schwarber or anyone help pay off Tommy Pham on a one-year deal if he comes back, which seems like a very strong possibility. So just giving salary relief creates a whole lot of more scenarios that AJ Preller and the front office can help improve Bob Melvin's team. So I think that's the main reason the Padres are doing that. Now, getting to Campusano or Nola, I think that, it wouldn't really be great to give up. You're not going to give up both of them, but one of them, it would hurt. But with 4 catchers now on the 40-man roster, Caratini, Nola, Campusano, and Jorge Alfaro, who they just traded 4 before the lockout, they're not going to have 4 catchers. So I think that you're going to see a trade. And I think the most likely possibility is that you see Luis Campusano attached with, an Eric Hosmer or a Will Myers in a trade because that would make that trade more attractive to the other team. Because the other team, if they're going to be taking on a not too productive player who has a big salary, they're going to want at least a star prospect type, at least someone that could have a big impact going forward on the major league roster in the years to come. They're going to want that type of guy back. So I think that's why you're going to see, if Hosmer is traded, someone like Campusano is going to be attached because, and for the Padres' sake, they don't want to give up on Mackenzie Gore because he looks promising now. They don't want to give up on him. He used to be the number 1 pitching prospect in the league. They're certainly not going to give up on C.J. Abrams. I mean, he's like a smaller Fernando Tatis Jr. They're not going to give up on him. They're not going to give up on Robert Hassel III. He's, looks like once he gets stronger, he could be another power-hitting outfielder with a lot of years of control that they want on their team in the future in contention. they're probably, I mean, they could, but they like James Wood, as a power bat type bat. Uh, they just don't want to give up their top prospects, especially when they've already given up some of their top prospects in Marcano, and guys and Xavier Edwards in the past. That they just don't want to do that anymore, because they believe in the top crop prospects that they have. So Campusano is the main, I think, the most viable trade target, in terms of those top Padres prospects, because they have 4 catchers. I think the comments that you've heard AJ Preller use in the past about, how much he likes Jorge Alfaro, his tools that he has, I think, and especially that he just traded for him. I don't think he's going to trade for him and flip him. Plus, I don't think he really has that whole much value right now, to be quite honest, on the trade market when this lockout, concludes, because he's had some injury history like Austin Nola's had. The power hasn't been there since 2018, 2019, when he hit 18 home runs in his first year with Miami, when he came over for that JT Realmuto trade. So I just don't think that you're going to see him traded. Caratini, I don't think that you're going to see him traded, like I mentioned in this article, because he's Joe Musgrove's personal catcher. He's, Yu Darvish's personal catcher. And like I mentioned here, being both of their personal catchers is one thing, but also you don't think that the front offices would deal him either, because he's a reliable backup, and that's what you want out of your backup, someone that can stay on the field. And Caratini proved that last year. He can prove, and he's proved that pretty much his entire career. Now the power is not totally there, but with that said, I think that you want a reliable backup catcher, and he is as reliable, as they come. And so, that's why. Getting to Austin Nola, while that might make sense, I get that he has an injury history as well, but it was, less than 2 years ago that he was hitting over 300 with the Mariners before the trade to the Padres. So I get that that's a smaller market, but he has shown in the big leagues, at least at some time span, that he can hit pretty well. He can play well. He can hit. He can definitely survive in the big league level at the catching position. He's pretty good defensively at catcher as well. And I think a team, if they're at least getting, I think, with Nola, maybe they're banking that he can stay healthy. Now, if you trade Nola with Hosmer, that's a very low chance of happening, just because of Hosmer's production and Nola's kind of injury history. But with that said, I think that could allow that other team to not have to give up as big of a prospect as maybe they would if you're giving up a Campusano, if the Padres are giving Campusano up to a team like the Red Sox in this deal. So again, Campusano or Nola and Hosmer, the Padres, the Red Sox take on $20 million of that remaining contract. Padres provided the other $39 million. Again, Hosmer still has $59 million remaining in the entirety of his contract. I believe he has 4 more years left. So the Padres would really have to be helping out financially, but we already knew that was going to be the case. And the Red Sox, I do want to get to why the Red Sox would be okay with this. I mean, Austin Nola, again, I'm more focusing on the Luis Campusano part of the catcher with Hosmer. It could be Myers too, but they're also already taking on a Jackie Bradley contract in the outfield. So I think that Campusano and Hosmer might be the more likely case. And I think for the Red Sox, like I mentioned here, I think a catcher is definitely something that they'd be interested in. A catcher of Campusano, his value is, he's someone, at the top of the minor league system for the Padres, that he definitely has value on the trade market, obviously, and he has potential. Potential. I know that it's only potential because it hasn't been done yet. So it's not like he's going to perform. He kind of struggled at the big league level with the Padres when he came here, but he looks better with the mechanics, shortened load at the plate. So we'll see if he ever gets to the big leagues again with the Padres. But I think it would be definitely an attraction to get Campusano if you're Chaim Bloom in the Red Sox, because Christian Vasquez, their starting catcher, he only has 1 year left on his major league deal. And so he's over 30 years, he's 31 years old. So I'm not quite sure that they'd want to continue that, relationship if he's over 30 and they have the chance to acquire a 23-year-old in Campusano who has the tools. He has good power and he has a strong arm. So I think maybe they're willing to bet on that. And if that doesn't work, they can always bring him back on Vasquez on a 1 or 2 year deal, or have him be the backup catcher and kind of mentor Campusano, or just whatever the case is. There's always 1 or 2 year deals or trades that they can make for a catcher if Campusano doesn't work out. Like I said, they can always bring Vasquez back. I think, being a free agent at the end of the year, that I don't think that they're going to want to give big money to Vasquez. But again, I'm not a Red Sox fan. I'm not in Boston, so I don't really have a huge pulse on what's happening with that whole Vasquez situation. But I think that's why it's interesting to the Red Sox. They get the potential in Campusano, and he could come in at the very right time to replace Vasquez as the permanent starting catcher. And for the Red Sox with Hosmer, they supposedly, I don't really believe this, but they supposedly had interest in him, finished in second place, I guess, in that whole free agent offseason when the Padres landed Hosmer. The Red Sox were not willing to give him that much money, but now that it's 4 years in, maybe they are more willing to. Chaim Bloom's not really, he doesn't, especially as we saw with Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts, one of the best players in the league, top 3 player in the league, in my opinion. They weren't even willing to pay him, give him big money. And if there's anyone you're going to give big money to, it's him. And the Dodgers did that before he even played 1 regular season game with them in a Dodger uniform. So I think that, it might be hard for the Red Sox to, want to pay that much money to Hosmer. But that's why I have the Padres in this potential hypothetical trade, picking up a big 39 of the 59 million remaining on the contract. I think the first base situation in Boston, they have Bobby Dahl back there right now. He hasn't really been great in a Red Sox uniform. And I think Hosmer, they have JD Martinez still as the DH. But if Martinez leaves, they can always have Hosmer there. They can have Hosmer as a pinch hit bat. If Bob Dahlbeck struggles, they can have Hosmer there. Now, one thing with Hosmer in Fenway that might not fit, though, I guess is he's not a huge oppo hitter. When he's on, he is, so he could totally pepper that green monster. But at the same time, he's more of a pull hitter. And if he does have the ball in the air, it's probably not getting out because of how deep that right center field gap is at Fenway. But I think that, the Red Sox, they could always go get Freddie Freeman if they want to pay that. But then that goes against their whole messaging of not paying Mookie Betts. So you're going to pay Freeman, but not pay Betts, who was there his entire career, won a World Series with them, so won an MVP. That just doesn't really make sense. They could bring in Rizzo, but they tried to last offseason, and that didn't happen. So I think, but I did want to bring up a point here by ending this. The Red Sox, that whole point that I have just been talking about, them not wanting to pay big money to guys and long term, with Chaim Bloom coming over from the whole Tampa Bay Rays thing where they don't pay big money to guys usually, and they're more nickel and diming guys, 1-2 year deals, Rich Hills type stuff. I think with that said, they just did trade Hunter Renfroe to the Brewers, former Padre, by the way, for Jackie Bradley Jr. And Jackie Bradley Jr. is one of the, worst offensive players in baseball, definitely worst offensive outfielders in baseball. So I think, they definitely showed, and we can pull up the contract here, by the way. They did show that they're willing, at least in that Bradley case, to take on big salary to get top 30. They got 2 top 30 prospects back in that deal before the lockout. So I think that definitely shows that they're willing to, take on a big contract like Jackie Bradley Jr.'s, and therefore Eric Hosmer's potentially, if they're going to get back a top prospect. The Padres, they have that top prospect that they can give to the Boston Red Sox and Luis Campusano. So here I'm pulling up on YouTube for all the YouTube folks. We got Jackie Bradley Jr.'s contract. He is a free agent at the end of 2024, so he's under control for the next 2 years. 2023 is a mutual option. Red Sox probably won't pick that up, but they're still paying $8 million on the buyout. So he got paid $6.5 million in the first year. Brewers didn't want to pay the next 2 years, so at least 2022. So he's getting paid $9.5 million. That's a pretty big contract for a defensive first Jake Marisnick type center fielder who doesn't have a whole lot of pop, doesn't hit for average, just isn't a great offensive talent. They're paying a lot of money to him. So they're willing to pay. So in this proposal, right, I have them taking on $20 million. That's, or right, I have them taking on, $20 million. They'd be paying for, let's see, we could pull up Hosmer's contract here. The Padres would obviously they're helping him out with $39 million. And if they take on, and if it's $39 million, I'm saying that they're giving them over the next 3 years. So they're giving them, all the Red Sox would have to pay here is that base salary, the $20 million for 2022. They would have 2023, 2024, and 2025 all taken care of by the Padres in this hypothetical trade. Now, maybe that's too lenient for the Padres, and they don't want to pay that much. But if you want the payroll flexibility, and you want some pretty good prospect in return, you're going to have to do it, I think. So all they'd have to do is pay $20 million for 2022. And I think the Boston Red Sox, a big market team, they can suck that up just for 2022. So that's right now, that's the Padres, payroll situation, what the Red Sox might want. Again, just a quick recap for all of those, kind of got lost, in my words there. The Padres would receive here a pitching prospect or maybe two, might be lower level because of how much that big contract is for Hosmer. And I have the Padres giving the Red Sox Campusano so that the Red Sox are able to take on Hosmer in his contract. $39 million of relief the Padres are giving the Red Sox taking on $20 million. I'd love to know your thoughts. Any other hypothetical trades you'd want me to go over? Again, it's the lockout. There's not a whole lot to talk about, so come on, give me any hypothetical trades and I'll talk about them. Thank you. This has been episode 80 of the Talking Friars podcast. Hope you have a good weekend. Ben Fadden here. Until next time, let's go Padres.